Good morning, class. This is Government, Thursday, April 2nd. This is your lesson for today. I'm just going to review a little bit, and then we'll start into new notes. I just want to encourage you guys, make sure you're doing your lessons, make sure you're doing your quizzes every single day. These grades do matter. They are being recorded, so make sure that you're doing a good job on that. Okay, last time we met, we talked about governors, so we're going to talk about state governors for a little bit. Review, and then we're going to get into state legislators and state Supreme Court justices. So, governor of the state of Indiana, governor of the state of Illinois. We talked about this a lot. Governor runs the executive branch for each state. So let's move ahead. We have all these notes. We're going to move ahead to state legislators. There's new notes. Number 2, write this down, the state legislators. State legislators. Letter A, every state has a bicameral or 2-house legislator except for Nebraska, which has a unicameral body. So 49 of our states have a bicameral legislator. So our national government, we have a bicameral, which means 2-house Congress. So we have the Senate, and we have the House of Representatives. There's 2 bodies that make up Congress. 49 of the states is set up the same way, except for Nebraska, which has only 1 legislative body. So every state has a bicameral, 2-house legislator, except for Nebraska, which has a unicameral body. The size of these houses vary, so it's not set up exactly like our national. Of course, each state sets it up a different way, but from a different view. Every state does have 2 houses, a bicameral legislative Congress, if you will, except for Nebraska only has 1. The sizes of these houses vary. Of course, we know nationally the House of Representatives, the representation is based on the population of each state, and then the Senate, every state gets 2, so it's an equal representation per state. So same thing with the state legislatives. It all varies. It's different state by state, and we'll see a few examples in a minute. But main thing you need to know is that 49 of the states have a bicameral legislative branch. 1 state, Nebraska, has a unicameral body. Okay, so let's look at the state of California. So this is just an example of how it works in California. So the California 2 bodies are the state assembly and the state senate. So it's they have different names. But if you look in this dividing line here for the state of California, Southern California obviously has a lot more people. They have 37 members in the state senate, 74 members in the state assembly. Northern California, which is much more rural, they have 6 members in the state assembly and only 3 members in the state senate. So it's very disparate in the amount of representation, whether you live in Northern California or Southern California. So California is split into the state assembly and state senate, and this diagram just shows the difference between rural California and urban California and the way that they are represented. So, one-party legislative control. For the first time since 1914, there is only 1 divided state legislative in the whole country, and that's largely because of Minnesota's state senate wasn't up for grabs for fall. So we'll talk about this. So this is the map of the partisan split between the House of State Legislative in 2019. So we talked about Nebraska. Nebraska has a unicameral house. The rest of these have 2 houses, and so all the red is an example, and this is 2019, where both houses were Republican. All the blue is where both houses were Democrat, and Minnesota is the only one that is split. So this happened first time since 1914, where there wasn't a lot of split. Of course, Nebraska doesn't count because it only has 1 body. But there is all the blue, the Democrats, both parts of the House, both houses in their Congress, their state legislative was Democrat. All the red, both houses were Republican. So this graph just shows that this is the first time in about 85 years that this has happened, or 95 years that this has happened. That where there's only 1 state that actually has a split where 1 house is controlled by 1 party and the other house is controlled by the other party. Every other state is either one or the other for both houses. Okay, here's another map, shows how the state legislators earn their income. So the green states is full-time, well-paid, large staff. So for all the green states, the state legislative, if you're in Congress, if you're a state senator or if you're a state representative for that state, then you are, if in these green states, they are full-time, well-paid, and they do have a large staff. The gray states are the hybrids, so there's not one or the other, and then the yellow states are part-time, low-pay, small staff. So some of these states, it's a mix of the two. The green ones are very heavily on being full paid, and the yellow ones are part-time. So these state legislators the members have other jobs to pay to make their money because they're only part-time in their office. So you see California, Alaska, Illinois, Wisconsin, Florida, some of the states for the full-time, and then a lot of states are in the middle, and then a lot of the more rural states are just part-time in their legislative. All right, courts, number 3, courts. So we talked about just like nationally, we have 3 branches of government. Every state also has 3 branches of government. We talked about the executive branch, which is the governors. We talked about the legislative branch, which is 2 houses for 49 of our states, then 1 house, and then just 1 house for Nebraska. And now we're going to talk about the judicial branch, or the court system, the judges. So every state has their own court system. Many states have a Supreme Court. So nationally we have a Supreme Court. Many states have a Supreme Court. So Indiana, Illinois both have Indiana Supreme Court or Illinois Supreme Court. Many states do have a Supreme Court, but every state has their own court system within the state. So there's 2 different types of court systems. So there's what's the trial courts. This is on a state level. But there is the trial courts, which is for things like traffic violations, divorce settlements, murders, etc. Any type of trial, anything like that would fall under the trial courts. And then we have appeals courts or an appellate court, which is like the state Supreme Courts or higher courts that are put into place to hear appeals. So there's certain standards and rules for how you can appeal a judgment, but in the trial courts, anything that you would imagine, traffic, divorce, murders, any type of crime, anything like that would go on in the trial courts. And then in the appeals courts or the appellate courts, that's what would fall. State Supreme Court would fall into that, or a type of higher court that some states have. And those are put into place to hear appeals. So those are 2 different types of courts in the court system. Make sure you know that. This is a picture of the Indiana State Supreme Court. There are 5 positions on the Indiana Supreme Court. These positions are held for 10 years. So nationally, our Supreme Court is a lifetime position, but Indiana has a 10-year limit. The judges receive a $165,000 a year salary. The Chief Justice gets $167,000 a year. And in the state of Indiana, the judges are appointed by the governor. So the governor, which is Eric Holcomb now, would appoint the Supreme Court justices for the state of Indiana. So 5 judges for that. Illinois State Supreme Court. So the Illinois Supreme Court, there are 7 positions. The judges receive $214,000 a year salary. Their term is also 10 years, and they are elected into office by the legislative branch of the Illinois government. Now, one interesting thing about how the Illinois Supreme Court works is that the Supreme Court justices fill their own vacancies. So if somebody leaves early, the Supreme Court, the judges on that court will vote to fill their own vacancies. So this is the only court and the only state in the country to do that. But in Illinois, if one of the judges on that panel leaves early, the Supreme Court justices that are currently on that panel will fill that vacancy. So let's review over the notes. Court system, the judicial branch of the government for the state. Every state has their own court system. Many states have a Supreme Court. There are 2 different types of court systems. The trial courts for all your basic stuff that you would see, traffic, divorce, murders, crime, anything like that. The appeals courts or the appellate court, that's where the state Supreme Court would fall under. They're a higher court, and they would hear different appeals as long as they fall under, they make a certain standard or fall under a certain category. So that's your lesson for today. Make sure you go over Thursday, April 2nd, take your quiz. Make sure you're taking your quizzes every day. So go over now, take your quiz, and we will see you later. Thank you.